It's week 3. I'm going to look at some things that I would suggest to have before you get started. So this would have made a lot more sense to do before I got started, at least on this project, but I've put together 8 things that I feel are kind of needed to get a project like this off the ground. So writing a non-fiction history book that's going to include doing research regarding or including interviews and photo gathering, document gathering, and stuff like that. So number 1, the first thing that I obviously recommend would make sense for any sort of writing project is a computer or laptop with writing software. After writing one book, I've kind of concluded that a laptop makes the most sense because it's mobile. Obviously you will be in numerous locations, and the ability to sit down and start writing at any moment when time is available makes the most sense, rather than being strapped to a desktop that you have to be sitting in front of in your house or in a particular room. And then as for writing software, I don't have any preference. Again, I've only used Microsoft Word, and that worked fine for me, but I'm sure there's plenty of others out there that would make just as much sense. Item number 2 is a photo scanner. So if your book should include photos or documents, I can't stress this enough, you're going to have plenty of things to scan. And once you do reach out to people or organizations, they're going to have plenty of photos and documents for you to get access to, and you're going to want to be able to scan those things. Usually individuals, you'll find somebody and they'll be like, oh, I have a bunch. And you're going to want that right at the get-go to be able to capture that, rather than say, okay, I'll get back to you later, because connections can be lost and opportunities could be missed. So you want to have that available from the first moment that you start this project. My personal scanner, initially I started with a really cheap scanner, just something, anything really to get me off the ground. And it wasn't worth the investment. It was probably $50. And it did fine for documents, which I don't need to reproduce in a book. I just need those for my own reference. But when it came to photos, it was just atrocious. There was just a lot of artifacting, a lot of things that were in there that I had to clean up with like Photoshop or something to make them usable. And it was just way too labor intensive. So working with at the time, most of our research was coming out of the Kent State Special Collections, and their recommendation was a particular scanner, which I've been using ever since, which is a Canon 9000. I don't know what model they're on now, but they recommended it, and after purchasing that, I was perfectly happy with that, and it did a great job with everything that we put it through. It can handle photos, documents, and slides, or even negatives as well. That'll be something. Someone may have a photo, but they don't have an actual photo. They have the negative, and then the ability to scan that is huge. A little bit of a learning curve with that, trying to get into scanning of different types of media, but it's not that difficult with just a little bit of trial and error. And actually also with the laptop as well, going back to item number 1, the reason a laptop is nice is because it's mobile, and you can also take the scanner with you. That actually is something that benefited me a couple of times, where finding people who had items who were somewhat local but didn't have the ability to scan them themselves and send them to me. The other 2 options are, one, that they let you take them away and then you scan them at your house or wherever and then return them. Or better yet, if they have, or if they're willing to let you into their house, you can take your laptop and your scanner to their house, and then you can scan them right there in front of them. And then when you're done, you pack up your stuff and leave. So laptop is huge for that, and it works well. And I did that several times before with the scanner. So definitely a laptop versus a desktop, and get a decent scanner. So tied in with that is item number 3, which is a photo release. So obviously, in order to include any photo in a publication, the publisher is going to want or need a photo release for every single photo that you have. So you're going to want to have that right at the get-go, because again, if you meet these people or even an institution gives you access to their stuff and you take them, at that moment you're going to want to have a photo release. And to be honest, it actually kind of helps the process. Some people may be hesitant to just give you things, but if you have a photo release that says that this is what I'm going to use it for, and here you have some kind of legal protection that it's not going to show up on a billboard downtown because you gave it to me. That actually helped, I think, through my previous experience with this. So photo releases, you can just Google them. They're all over the internet. Some of them require, or some of the templates that I saw mentioned having the name of the publisher, like who's going to do it, that you're granting rights to this publisher. Well, at this point, week 3, I don't have a publisher yet. So I said, a publisher to be determined later or something like that. And then it says like you're giving them all these rights to digital and physical copies and even online advertisement for it. And I did have some previous contributors with my last book who weren't necessarily interested in having them show up in a publication, or in an advertisement. And that's perfectly fine. I have no problem with that. So what I did when I gave them a release, I said, cross out or make any changes that you want until you're comfortable with it. And so some would. They would just X out and say, well, not for advertisement, only for the digital or the physical copy of this book. And, that's perfectly fine. And then also then you want to show them what their credit will be. It's the John Smith collection. It's usually how I defaulted on the release that I had, but if they don't like it and they want anything else, they want the Smith family collection, or just put from John Smith, that's fine. Make those edits right there. They can cross them out. Then once that was done, I would scan it and then I would send them a copy of that so they had their record. I would keep my record. Or if this had to happen over mail or snail mail, that if they send me the digital copies via email, then I would put together this release and then send it to them, and they would have to probably scan it and send it back, which can be a little bit difficult if they don't have access to that. But if they can't scan it, then I would send them 2 copies, one for them to sign and keep for themselves, and one of them to sign and send back to me, with including a self-addressed stamped envelope. And then again, I would scan it and I would email them another copy of it, just so that they had as many copies as possible of that. So there was no question in the future about what rights that they did give you and if there's any concerns along that. So the 4th item is online storage or cloud storage. This is something that initially I'm not really that familiar with. I had never used it for my own personal needs, but once I started research for my previous book, it became absolutely invaluable. So obviously the 2 biggest players are Google Drive and Dropbox. There's some pluses or minuses with that, and I guess I could talk about that at a later date, but I highly recommend every single step of the process. These photos that you collect or documents, any research, and even when you get to the writing portion, to keep all of your work on there. It's an ultimate backup should your computer crash, your laptop crash. And it's also useful because you can include other contributors or collaborators. If you need to bring someone in on something and you have a folder online, you can include them in that so they can go in and access those things. And that actually becomes pretty valuable when you kind of get into the actual work of putting the book together. Sharing of photos or stuff like that. So I can't recommend using online or cloud storage for this whole process. And it's relatively cheap. Most of the stuff is free, at least initially. They give you a couple gigabytes or something like that. And if you need to expand, which in the previous book I needed to because it was the photos. They ended up having to be scanned without any compression, which is called a TIFF file if you're familiar with that, but the sizes are big. So you end up having hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 or more photos. That's a lot of storage. And so that having the base amount didn't really work. And then I think just to extend it was only $10 for a year, and I was out to like 100 gigs or something, which is by far more than I'll ever need for any project that I'm involved with. So item number 5 is a PDF editor. So there's numerous options. Obviously Adobe has theirs, and there's a bunch of other products as well that provide this. You're going to find that some online resources like digital newspapers and other stuff, they're in PDFs. And let's say for a newspaper, it's going to download the entire Sunday edition, which is going to be 50 pages, but you need one article in one page or one page. To be able to go in and extract that is a must, just for the sake of only keeping what you need and not having to keep the whole document. Also, it's going to be useful putting your own documents together. One of those will be the photo release. Let's say the writing software that you use is Microsoft Word, and you want to send that to someone for them to, edit or sign or something like that, and they don't have a Word program to open it up. PDF seems to be a little bit more universal. So to be able to create that document on your computer, turn it into a PDF, and then email it to people, and then this way, because there's usually, most computers have some rudimentary PDF reader that they can get in there and either print it out for them to sign or something like that. So a PDF editor, I've used it a lot over the last couple of years with writing the last book. And same is true now. Even now that I'm just a couple weeks into this one, I'm using a PDF editor quite a bit, combining files into one master document that includes a bunch of different stuff, and that's been really useful for organizing stuff that I've put together. Item number 6 would be an email address, or at least a unique email address to this project. Now you have your own personal one, and I kind of did that last time. I used my own personal one, which is fine, but it turns into a lot. You get a lot of communications with contributors, organizations, and it ended up being a lot to kind of find among my own personal emails. So you're doing a lot of searching. I used Gmail, and it's a lot. And so it'd be nice to have those in one spot, that all my communications took place within one account. Also, if you have an address that's unique to the project, in the case for this one, I have KSU CBS History at Gmail, Kent State University Campus Bus Service History. It's kind of easy to remember, and then you can write it down or something like that. But anyway, you're going to meet people like, oh, I have stuff, how can I contribute? Just give them that address, and it's something that they can share, and it's a little bit of a memory trigger with it, with the naming. And that's actually going to be useful not just from the earliest stage, but that was something we were doing book signings, and we ended up having people came forward that had, oh, I have additional photos or stories. And to be honest, even though the book was done, we still wanted to capture those things. So we didn't have an email address. In fact, actually, I think the first time this came up was we were doing a interview for a newspaper article, and in that we said we'd love to capture anyone's stories that they have to contribute. And they're like, oh, what's your email address? And we're like, that's a good question. We don't have an email address other than our personal ones. We don't want that in the daily local newspaper. So we went home quickly and created one, and then sent that off to the reporter, and she included it in there, and we got a couple responses, which was great. So that would have been really nice to have at day one, because I kind of have all of these things consolidated into one account. So, and one nice thing with that, like if your Gmail account, at least I know if I'm familiar with that, it comes with some cloud storage. I wrote it down here, it was 15 gigabytes. So that kind of goes back to the cloud storage. You get this account, which is free, and it comes with 15 gigabytes, which is probably more than enough for most projects, at least on a project I'm going to be involved with minimal photos. So that takes care of two things at once, of taking using this unique email address, and then you kind of get the cloud storage along with that. Number 7, this is actually something that's new to me, so I don't have a lot of experience to share, but just playing around with it, I'm kind of excited about using it, and that is basically a Google Voice number, which there's probably other ways of doing this, but this seemed to be the easiest way, because you kind of tie it into the other Google products. This is in no way sponsored by Google. They don't even know I exist. But Google Voice, so it allows you get a unique local phone number. You can kind of pick from a list when you generate this thing. So I got one that's the area code is going to be for my area. And then you can place calls or receive calls. It's your number. You can give that to somebody, say, call this number, and you can record the phone call, which the reason I want to record the phone call is for interviews. Now, as many people there may be within my local area that I can drive and meet, there will be people that are not local, and you will want to capture their stories. And what I had done before was just taking physical handwritten notes when I was talking with them on the phone, which is incredibly labor intensive. I'm not, a stenographer. I'm not a really fast writer. So that there was like these pauses where I have to tell them, oh, by the way, I'm just making notes. And then they would wait while you finish writing those things down and then ask them the next question. But boy, if I could have recorded that, would have been amazing, right? I could have just finished one answer with another question, and then we kind of keep going through, and you really don't kind of lose the flow of that. So I've played with the Google Voice here just between myself and my wife, where I called her, she called me, one way or the other, and yeah, you just, they call and then you hit 4 on the keypad, and then it announces this phone call is being recorded. So obviously everybody's aware. You're going to make prior arrangements to that anyway. And then you just record it, and then it saved it as a voicemail. And then I was able to go on the Google Voice, website, whatever, my account, and then I could download it from there, which would be huge. And I could make my own transcript later on what that says or what was said in there. So that's huge, and then I could put that on my cloud storage as kind of backup. So Google Voice, I'm kind of excited about using that, and again, you're going to start meeting people, hopefully right at the first moment when you kind of get the word out that you're doing this project. People will come to you like, I have stories to tell, and you want to be in a position where, like, great, I can capture those, whether it's in person or doing it over the phone. And again, to be able to capture, I think, will be pretty useful going forward. And kind of the last thing I have, so item number 8 is a business card. And this is, again, another way of sharing your contact information with people that you kind of meet in a casual environment. And this kind of goes to back when we were doing book signings. People would have stuff and they'd be like, oh, what's your email address? And we did have one at that point, but again, now they have to write it down. Boy, and they're like, do you have a business card? No, we don't. So if we had a business card, that would have been so much more useful to have your Google Voice number or even your personal cell phone, wherever you want to, but have this have this email address on there so they can take it with them. And again, it's kind of a token of that event, and so they can try to remember to contact you with that. It'd be a little bit easier, I think. Oh, the screen just went out in the back. That's bring that back. Anyway, so yeah, business card. And to be honest, it's item 8, and I haven't even done that myself, and I'm already kind of regretting that. So I need to get on that one and have that done, since I have the email address and the other stuff, and put that together. So as I meet people, I can give it to them, or ultimately give them a couple. Go, hey, if you know other people, hand them one, and then just have them contact me, and then I can, get their stories and talk about photos or documents or something like that. So that's kind of the 8 things that I recommend to have kind of from the get-go when you kind of get into this. It starts pretty fast and furious, kind of like opening the floodgates. Once you can kind of connect with the community, if the story that you're writing has a community, in this case it does, it's the alumni of the campus bus service. But once the word gets out there, people start contacting you, and you want to be ready to capture those things. Obviously, I have limited time and I can't do everything, so you kind of have to spread those out. But to have all of these pieces in place from the first moment is incredibly helpful. Not having some of these things like the scanner and stuff with people that have photos, you don't want to miss those because you'll have regrets. Like, great, I didn't. And ultimately, if you have a story to tell where people are older, it's not necessarily uncommon that by the time that you met them and then get around to trying to follow up to capture their stories or stuff, they may have passed. So no time like the present. And so anyway, this is my experience, things that I've kind of learned with the last book and I'm applying to this one. I'm sure there's other things. Again, this is probably more so just for kind of a non-fiction history book where you do need to kind of capture stuff. Obviously, a fiction book, you probably don't care. And if it's not about history, maybe you don't have this type of stuff to do with. But if it's a similar book to this, I highly recommend all of these. So hopefully it helps anybody that should ever watch this, which is probably just, the wife and kids, but hello. And that's it. So that's the end of week 3, approaching the last week of my first month, which will be week 4, obviously, because that follows 3. So thanks for watching 3, and looking forward to 4. Bye now.